Welcome back to another episode of Lit and Bruised, an Atlanta literary podcast. I'm John Carroll.
And I'm Matt DeBenedictis. We got a great episode today, but before we jump into that, I do want to make mention of the giveaway we've got going on. We're going to be giving away books from Tom Cheshire, Lisa Cross-Smith, Elena Huff-Tucker, Jamie Iredell, Molly Broderick, Laura Relier, Blake Butler, Dope Girls Magazine, Teresa Davis, Corey Lorick, Nate Mask, Ryan J., Jared Yates Sexton, basically everyone who's been on the show last season and this season. And we're going to give all these books away. Some of them are completely out of print. And all you got to do is to put a review about us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker. And before we jump into the summer break, we'll check out and just pick somebody at random, and you're going to get all those damn books. I mean, it'd actually make a really good gift for somebody for Christmas, or whatever holiday works for you. But either way, just thinking ahead, go for it. Leave a review. But we've got a really amazing episode. So happy how this one came out. We got a chance to sit down with Nicholas Tecosky. He's the Viceroy of Write Club Atlanta alongside Mike Johns. If you're asking yourself, what is Write Club? It's very simple. It is a literary bloodbath. Two writers get on stage with opposing topics. They present however they feel in 7 minutes about that topic, whether it be fiction, poetry, just essay. They just go at it, and then the audience decides who wins. That in a nutshell is Write Club. But on top of that, Nicholas Tecosky is also a stage actor and a film screenwriter. And we end up talking a lot about how he's the viceroy on stage when he's hosting Write Club, because that's actually a character. And this character was designed out of a necessity, a tool to help perform under anxiety. This is a great topic that is not spoken up about that much when it comes to writing, that there's the performance of what you've written. There's the performance part of working with an audience. And sometimes running a show or a live event, that is very, very key in the literary community. It was great to talk about this, considering John and I both studied Nick as a performer when we first started doing live readings, because he came from a theatrical background. So to really delve into the anxiety and the stress that can come from that performance was it's very kind of relieving for both of us, because both of us, I mean, we talk about in the episode, we have our own little demons with that we cope with, but there's a lot of anxiety and fear that comes from and in the anticipation of a performance, whether it's reading or just hosting. How do you deal with it? How do you take it on? You got to cope with that shit. You got to make it work. And creating a character is a healthy way. This is a great sit down with one of the most badasses of the Atlanta lit community, Nicholas Tecosky, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
You know what's weird, Matt?
What?
I don't really read much anymore. I don't really do readings that often.
No, you kind of do them in spurts.
I will. I'll typically have like one or two, maybe even three. I think the last one I read at Case Studies 4 or 5 months ago, I think. That was fun. I don't know why I don't do them that much. I enjoy them. I think it's just because when you kind of get busy planning things and hosting things, you kind of...
It's a different brain. It's a different animal.
Yeah, you take on a different role. But I do... I should do that more often.
Yeah.
We should both do that more often, because, I mean, we both used to read a lot.
Yeah.
I miss you reading.
Well, I miss you reading, too.
I miss your words serenading my ears.
Me just yelling on a stage.
That's really what I meant. Yelling about the Pope or RoboCop. Yeah, I mean, what other pop culture icons have you yelled about on a stage before?
One time I wrote an entire piece simply because I wanted to describe someone wearing a Wii controller that had been dipped in gold.
Why have I never heard of this before?
The whole piece was not very good. There were some funny parts to it.
Do you have it somewhere?
No, I lost that in one of my Great Drive errors.
No. You know, you're probably my favorite piece that you've ever read and written was the Kurt Cobain piece. Mm-hmm. I actually have the poster in my bedroom, and I look at it every time I go to put socks on. And I read it about once a week, honestly.
Wow, so you just sit there and you think, Kurt Cobain never got to experience yoga pants.
Or you had the one about the GPS.
Yeah.
And he never got to mourn Johnny Cash's death.
I've actually done updated versions of it.
Yeah.
Based on other tech issues.
I need to do that. We need to put that on the site. If you haven't ever heard of Matt DeBenedictis' Kurt Cobain piece. Go looking for it. Can they find it somewhere? Is it online?
No, it is not, actually.
Well, never mind. You're screwed, but there is a
Hit
poster.
me up. I have some posters of it still.
Yeah, I mean, the posters are amazing, too. Who did it? Was that Brian Manley?
Yeah, he did the design.
Brian Manley. Awesome designer.
And then Gina Myers, former Atlanta poet, she actually put it out through one of her presses at one point.
I remember that. Yeah, that's where I ordered it from. Yeah, great piece. We need to put that somewhere. That's too good just to go in the archives and be forgotten about.
But what that makes me think of is how, like, that is not a piece I could have performed, like, early on.
Yeah.
When I was writing, because there is a performance part to it. There's the pauses have to hit at the right point, or the joke or whatever is supposed to be the existential thought just won't connect.
Yeah, you've got to be very controlled in that, and you're a new reader going through something as fast as you can, not really thinking about the emphasis that you need to put and the inflection you need to put, which is interesting that we're talking about this on this week's episode, is because my third reading ever, which is awful to listen to, there's a recording of it somewhere out there, was at Write Club back in 2012. I've gone back and listened to it, and I actually like the story. It's definitely like early days of John Carroll being very crass, following the rule of, I may not be the best writer in the room, but I'll be the most memorable by saying just fucked up shit, basically. Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of jerking off in that story.
Yeah, I mean, it was a coming of age story.
Yeah,
so naturally. But yeah, I read that at Write Club, and it's I love the piece. I'd love to I never want to read it again. Actually, I want nothing to do with that piece. But it was good to have the recording of it because I learned so much. Because I was the last reader of the night with 3 bouts. So I was the 6th reader, and I was so nervous.
It's a tough position to be in.
It is, and I was going up against a guy who wrote novels and whatnot, who just handed my ass to me. Granted, I did get good crowd response, but anyway, with all that being said, with us is the host of Write Club ATL, Write Club Atlanta, is Nick Tecosky.
Hi guys.
Hello,
what's going
Nick.
on?
Hey,
it's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
It's really good to it's really interesting to sit here quietly and watch you talk for a few minutes, and just kind of like it's strange, you know.
Yeah.
Listening to this, they don't know that there's a creeper sitting across the table from you,
Just
like scratching himself and like waiting to jump in.
It's like you're on hold.
Yeah.
But
it's really strange.
But you're not really on hold. You're just
the hold music is you guys talking.
Yeah,
it's like going to the bank or the post office, and they're like, "I got to talk to someone about this," and you're just standing there while they talk to someone right beside.
Right,
you.
and they don't look at you. They're like, you're just feeling really awkward and kind of.
Did I just disappear? Did I fall into like a vortex hole?
I swear, this is a really quick story. So occasionally, I will use shrooms. I microdose sometimes because it, helps with the moods and, helps me be creative at times. You take just a little bit, not enough to actually get high. But I was microdosing one day, and Amy, my wife, called and asked if I would run and grab something at Lowe's. And I was like, you know what? No problem. Only I get to Lowe's, and as I'm asking this guy who works there for a stacking kit for a washer dryer, I realize all of a sudden that I'm actually tripping. And I wasn't expecting to. This was a new batch of shrooms. I hadn't tried them out yet, so I didn't realize they were that strong. I took like what I would normally take.
You need a micro.
And I realized in the middle of this that I'm just like, I'm standing in front of this guy who's on his computer looking up if they've got the stacking kit. And I realize, A, I'm tripping, and B, I don't know how long I've been standing here, and I don't know if he's already helped me. And so I'm literally just standing there, and I'm starting to sweat, and he's just not looking at me, and it just keeps happening and happening. I swear it was like 3 hours long, but it was probably 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And at one point, he looks up and kind of like looks me in the eye, and I'm like, oh, he knows. And he just goes, I'm sorry it's taking so long. And I was like, oh, hey, no problem, man. And it was like everything melted away and everything was fine. And I like looked at like a blow up airplane that they had for Christmas or something. Everything was great after that. But anyway, don't go to Lowe's if you're microdosing on new product. And that's it. I'm gotta go, guys. That's it for me.
That's a good story.
Hi, I'm Nick Tecosky, and
I wish I had that experience because I just get sick from mushrooms when I've tried it.
I mean, I have too.
Like it's
just
guaranteed,
a matter of
no matter how much.
It's a matter of like Yeah. Okay. Well, no. Some things just make you sick.
Yeah, it's just my body's just like, nah. Try other things.
I know. For me, I can't do a lot because I don't use them really recreationally so much as I really do actually use them because I did a lot of research on, how psilocybin works in your system and there's been increasing reseach on microdosing and how it can actually help stabilize moods and
it can help with addiction issues as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who I won't name her, but I have a friend who quit smoking using shrooms. She smoked for a decade.
Wow.
Took shrooms a couple of times, really thought about how much she wanted to quit. The next day, she got up, she started smoking a cigarette, realized she didn't want it at all, put it down, and has been smoke-free for 5 years.
I've got a lot of friends that have done hallucinogens and things like that. And did I pronounce that right? Hallucinogens?
Yeah.
Is that my?
I don't know.
Hey, you all just played along with me. So, but it was weird because we'll sit there and have these very deep existential conversations, and they'll say to me, "So you've done X, Y, Z or whatever?" I'm like, "No, I've never done that before." And they're like, "Really? How do you know about this stuff?" And that almost worries me. That I've never taken these drugs, but I can talk to these people on that level.
Maybe you've just always been tripping, and that's just you've got that hardwired into your head.
Yeah. Dude, I feel like we could have a 2-hour podcast just talking about that statement right there.
I mean, we could just take shrooms and just do the 2-hour. Although I guarantee I am not going to be interesting if I do that.
I fall asleep.
I'm so
with
talking about
stuff
my
that.
stomach hurting.
Yeah,
I'll stare at this curtain behind you for the remainder of the time.
Stare at the pattern. You'll get lost in the pattern of it.
Yeah.
The only thing that I use is alcohol. I drink alcohol, and I feel like anything else would just make me tired, like any kind of prescription medication. It always just makes me tired. I just want to go to sleep, or it turns me into a zombie.
Right.
But alcohol is the one thing that I just become very exaggerated. And I feel like I'm already pretty exaggerated. And then you add alcohol. Hung out with some buddies last night, went out to dinner, and had a few drinks. And I realized that I was increasing in exaggeration. And then it was, but you don't really think about it too much because you're in it. And I woke up this morning and I was like, wow, I didn't do anything crazy. But I was just like, John, you were in some rare form last night.
Yeah.
And it's funny. So, I like to keep it to a beer or two. That's usually good. Keep me about normal. I don't get too crazy with that.
Yeah. I don't get crazy anymore. I do get hangovers a lot more than I used to if I drink. Like drinking at levels that, I did when I was 25, or I'd wake up and I'd feel bright-eyed and bushy-tailed the next morning. I can have 2 glasses of wine now. And it would have been nothing 10 years ago, but now I wake up the next morning at 7 a.m. with dry mouth and burning eyes and just that feeling in the back of your skull, like your soul was sucked out through your ear and then jammed back in your other ear. And I feel that way after 1 or 2 strong drinks sometimes now.
I don't know if in my 20s if it was the headache part of the hangover that bothered me or just the regret. I feel my hangovers were regret. And it was usually just, oh man, Johnny being Johnny again, Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this podcast, I primarily go by John these days, but I feel like in my 20s, it was very suiting of me to go by Johnny.
Oh, I mean, I met you as Johnny.
Yeah.
7-ish years ago.
Yeah, I was coming out of it.
Your transition.
I feel like I led
Johnny
the charge to start calling you John because it's no, Johnny's not around anymore.
Yeah.
John's responsible.
Yeah,
he's not going to piss you off too much.
Johnny got left back in my 20s. He still comes out. He came out last night for a sneak peek, but it was nothing. It was more just giving my friend shit for selling it. These are the things I get mad about it at 36 is why did you sell that camera lens? We were going to do such a cool art project with it. That's the kind of stuff where versus, in your mid-20s, it's I'm going to get drunk and dance on this table and maybe jump through this window because it'll be entertaining. It is funny how your priorities shift as you get older.
Well, I mean, I channel most of the times that I tend to drink the most, I don't drink to get drunk anymore, but I drink to maintain a certain level of social activity. Like, I don't drink alone at home.
Yeah.
But I have severe social anxiety, and I find that if I have, like, 2 drinks, then I'm great. And everything's fine. And if I can maintain that level over the course of hours... Yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, I have to admit, Right Club, I have always... I get a baseline of 2 drinks in me, and then I'm able to, like, get in front of people and yell. Crippling stage fright. Like, I've always had it. With Right Club, it's particularly pointed because I'm in charge of...
Yeah, you're directing it.
I'm in charge of the pace of the thing. So.
I remember you saying, I think I was at a Right Club about a year or 2 ago, and I think I was sitting next to Amy, and you came up and you said something about anxiety. And I've always had anxiety while reading. Right. It's just honestly in the last 3 to 6 months really started to dissipate because I've taken a lot of action to get rid of my anxiety. It's been driving me crazy. I don't have social anxiety, though, but... the adrenaline rush on the stage would kind of mess up my blood sugar, which then kind of causes anxiety.
Right.
But I remember you saying that, and I was like, Nick Tecosky has anxiety?
Oh my God.
Like on stage?
Crippling social anxiety. I stage fright. I mean, like, the whole thing. When I first started doing Right Club regularly, like half the time I would, like, actually vomit. Because I was so freaked out by the whole thing. This was like the first 6 months.
Yeah.
After that, I kind of got used to it, and I started kind of figuring out my coping mechanisms.
Sure. Yeah, you learn how to kind of play with, you figure out what your strengths are, and like how to read the audience.
Well, and I've been on like anti-anxiety medications for 20 years because they keep me level. If not, I am prone to severe panic attacks. And if I'm not on anything, then I'll have 2 or 3 a day that last 30, 40 minutes. And I'm just like wiped out. I'll wake up 2 or 3 times over the course of the night just from a dead sleep with adrenaline coursing through my system. Those are the
worst ones, too.
They're the worst.
That way. Because at least if you're awake and you start having an anxiety attack, you can kind of feel it coming on.
Yeah.
And then, when you wake up...
And you can kind of manage it.
Yeah.
Like, I try to curb it. But, like, when you're coming from a dead sleep, it's like getting slapped in the face.
Yeah, definitely.
And you don't know how to respond immediately.
So what would you say are your on-stage coping mechanisms outside of like a couple drinks before you get up on stage?
Well, there are the couple of drinks. I tend to make sure that right before I go on, in the few minutes before I go on, I'll try to just walk somewhere that nobody else is for just a minute. Like, I'll go all the way to the back of the courtyard of the ballroom, and I'll just pace for a couple of minutes, and I'll breathe, and it's just like just a couple of breathing exercises. But also, I learned early on that there's Viceroy. Like, that was my sort of fanciful title when we first started, was Viceroy of Right Club Atlanta. And I realized that, like, if I can channel that into a character, then, like, I think of the person who hosts Right Club Atlanta as a totally different person than Nick Tecosky. And he can get up and there's, like, no fear. He's not afraid. As soon as I'm on stage and talking, all of the anxiety, like, floats away because I'm no longer myself. I'm just, like, placing a mask on my face. And it's easy to talk at people that way. And it's like, and there's, getting we get heckled all the time, and it's not scary once you're up there.
Yeah.
Because, I'm in charge. I'm like the host is in charge. The Viceroy is taking charge. And, me personally just sits back.
And just watches this guy go to work. I think I've told you this before, and I'm going to give you some compliments here.
But,
so the third reading I ever did, you hosted it.
Oh, right.
And then the second reading I ever did, Mike Johns was at it and invited me to do the third reading. And I was so green. But I've always been a charismatic human.
I think you're very charming.
I appreciate it. Thank you. But I didn't know how to channel that in a stage kind of thing. I never did any acting or never did any kind of theater stuff, never had done any really public speaking. Minus my Christian years, I did do some preaching, which is really funny in my late teens, early 20s. So I did have a little bit from that, but I didn't initially think about that stuff. But honestly, it was watching other people get up on stage and how they are on stage, and people that I would know. So it was really learning how to channel certain emotions. I actually watched you and Johnny Drago. Actually, which is interesting, for you personally, was the Ant and Grasshopper piece that you read 5-6 years ago, which you read at the Resolve reading, and which was really cool to see you do it again, because I remember watching you do that, and I was like, okay, how does he get up there and channel this emotion? Because I can be emotional in conversation just off stage, but when I get up there, all of a sudden I'm like, ugh. But I started doing something similar, though, where if you see John Carroll walking down the street, he's just like, hey, how you doing, whatever. But when I get on stage, it's, hey, what's going on? And I just like turn this guy on. Mm-hmm. He's just like the extended version of me. And I'm not always like that. I'm pretty laid back, actually, most of the time. But yeah, it's such a helpful thing to be like, I'm this character on stage right now. Right. And I'm going to give you that. And that's what you're going to get.
It's an incredibly useful tool to have, especially if you're the kind of person that like has severe stage fright or is incredibly anxious. And I mean, Viceroy actually kind of came from an extension of, I worked at Stone Mountain Park for a number of years. Like when they opened that Crossroads area, when at first it was like that really sort of tone deaf, like, old-timey Southern kind of thing. But at 22, right out of college, I got hired to play the deputy sheriff of this town. And the name I came up with was Deputy Sheriff Cuthbert C. Cuthbert. and at first it was like street work like you'd see in like the Ren Fair or something like that. So I just had to go up and talk to strangers dressed in this like doofy costume, like this old-timey Barney Fife.
Oh, geez, you'd have to like embrace a character to just deal with
absolutely. That. And I mean, he had like a little bit of a lateral lisp, and he was like very Southern, and like he walked down the street and he like, hi, I'm Cuthbert C. Cuthbert. It's nice to see y'all, and I hope y'all are having a great day here at Stone Mountain Park. And that was like something that I did daily for years, and then we started having shows. Like I hosted a pie eating competition as Cuthbert C. Cuthbert.
Wow!
And it was in that doing the pie eating competition with this like lateral lisp where I'm yelling at people like, ladies and gentlemen, come on down to the 7th annual pumpkin pie eating competition right here in Crossroads, Georgia, brought to you by the good people of J. Wiley's General Mercantile. If we ain't got it, it don't exist. And that was like something that like, but doing that 5 times a day, 4 days a week for like years, you just kind of got into a place where like, you're backstage and you put on your goofy cowboy hat and you just take a breath and you walk out and you're just a different person totally, and you're saying the same shit. But like the way I host Right Club, if you like listen to me intro on stage, similar, it's the same it's the same kind of fast talking patter, and it was just like it just gets in your bones after a while, and you're just used to it. I mean, like, shit. The thing I just said, I hadn't spoken those words in easily 8 years. Yeah. But, like,
it's in the muscle memory.
Like, it's absolutely in the muscle memory. I did it enough times that it's like, you can just step into Cuthbert anytime you want.
I'm glad that I was going to ask if you do the impression, then you went into it. I was like, yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, so you can't describe Deputy Sheriff Cuthbert C. Cuthbert and not go into Cuthbert C. Cuthbert. I mean, it's just, it's funny and weirdly embarrassing to think of my days as sort of like a Southern fried Rennie, but like, that's kind of like, a Rennie is somebody who works at a Ren Festival. FYI.
I'm curious, though. So mine was, so it sounds like we have similar ones of going into that. I also would drink, and then I would also I would go to the chiropractor the morning of a show that I was going to read at, because that would release anxiety. And then if I ever have, because I used to, probably 80% of the readings I've ever done, I had a panic attack while I was doing it, but you'd never know because I just sucked it in.
Oh yeah.
But if you ever saw me at a show rocking with back and forth, or switching my feet, or gripping the side of something, if there was a podium, I would just kind of lean into it and then just do that. But after the first few, my hands do not shake. You'd never know because they're not doing that. It's just all internal. And then I would walk off stage, go into the bathroom, and just kind of let out.
Oh, yeah. It's just like everything drops off.
Yeah, and it felt like, I remember when I put out my chapbook, 2013, I remember walking off that stage, and I read 2 pieces that night, and it was And I was like, you have to be perfect. You cannot mess up. And I remember I was like, you got to read 2 pieces. And one of them was pretty long. And I did not make a mistake. I was like, I nailed it. But then I hadn't even really drank that much. I got in the car to go home, and I felt like I had just run a marathon because just trying to be.
Oh, yeah, it's draining.
Yeah, it's just, you wouldn't believe it. But I'm curious, Matt, what are some of your coping mechanisms for getting on stage, reading, performing, hosting, whatever it might be?
Well, I feel like I kind of have to go back to actually being a pastor.
Yeah.
I always forget that about you. Like every time you bring it up, I'm like surprised again. I'm like, he's told me that 12 times. Like
that's good because I feel bad about it. Sometimes I feel like, man, I talk about that was like 14 years ago. I talk about that too much.
That's going to be a formative thing in your life. I mean,
yes.
That's going to. I mean,
those scars never heal.
Oh, I can't imagine. Like Pastor Matt and Deputy Cuthbert are like they're like kind of in the same headspace, I imagine.
Oh, very much so. And like when I started out working with nonprofits and trying to basically help them get their shit together because nonprofits can be kind of messy, especially when you're dealing with a lot of different personalities and then you're dealing with finances. And came down to Atlanta, ended up becoming assistant pastor, and it's like I knew how to speak to people in public. I knew how to do public speaking, but it was like how to emphasize things, how to connect, how to speak for 45 minutes on topics that people hear a lot, but then how make it different. And I actually poured myself into stand-up comedy. I'm horrible at it, but as an art form, the ability to get up there on stage and work on the timing and to know how to like do little variances on things. Like I remember sitting around in pastor circle, like the whole imposter syndrome is huge with pastors of like, oh yeah, I'm a imposter. Someone will find out. And people will be like, oh yeah, I watched Yaconelli preach and that's how I started doing this. And I'm just like, I watched a lot of Bill Hicks.
Well, that man knew how to preach.
Yes, he did. Like you came out and you're just like, yeah, I want to take some weird drugs and create some shit. So it's like I tried to attach with that. But then when I went into...
He had the righteous anger thing down.
Yes, he did. I mean, I've always admired the fact that, he's on his deathbed and his dying thing was to read books to his friends.
That's fucking cool.
Yeah, it was Lord of the Rings, but it was just like, this is the most important thing to me and I want to share it to you with my dying breaths.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I absolutely did not know that. That is beautiful.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, it's like, that is an amazing way to go out. It's like, I get chills about it and I think about it every time. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to go out and play a record.
I'm not going to be that selfless. I'm going to be like, get the fuck out of my room. Leave me alone. If I can, I'm going to try to masturbate one more time. I don't want you here. Like, maybe if I'm still around when I'm done, you can come back in. But, like, knock.
Yeah. Just give me a little, just knock and then give a pause.
Yeah, give a pause. If I don't say anything, then I'm probably dead.
I just had a really dark thought.
Go on.
I mean, you all kind of took it there, but I'm just going to bring it up. I was thinking, I was like, what do you do? Like, okay, if you've got your dying breath, but let's say, it's going to be in the next hour,
Right.
What do you do? And I was thinking, I was like, I probably want to like eat something, get something good, know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought that's kind of like popped into my mind. And then I thought, well, I guess that's kind of like a good thing about being on death row.
Right.
Like what your last meal is going to be.
Right.
Most of the time, you never get to know what that's going to be if you just randomly die, or maybe you're too sick and then you're not able to enjoy that. And I know that's really kind of dark to say, but that's kind of like an interesting thought that.
But the reality is actually even darker, and it kind of goes with what you were just saying. Was it in Hawaii when they had the fake missile launch?
Oh God, yeah.
Pornhub's
I saw that.
Viewership skyrocketed there. So people are like, I'm about to die. All right, I got to go look at my favorite videos.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, like all of the vices, I'd line them up immediately. The thing is, like, I haven't smoked in 3 years, but if the very first thing I would do if I found out that I had an hour to live is I would hightail it to the buddies down the street, and I would buy a pack of Parliament Lights, and I would suffer my way through the first one because everybody knows the first cigarette after you haven't smoked in a long time sucks. And then I would just like savor the next 5. And then I would probably get sick of it and throw it away. But like, I would smoke as much as I could. I would drink a lot of beer. Probably I would visit some internet sites. I mean, or I would. Hopefully, my wife would be there. We would like.
Yeah, you just do the like. Well, you know, maybe not do some micro dosing. Maybe do some max dosing.
Oh, go all out. Like, just take all of the rest of the mushroom. I go like, if I'm going to see God, I want to be ready to see God. I'm going to see God before
it's all going to burn up in the fire anyway.
I know. And like, I'm not going to be able to tell the difference. No, you really can. And I mean, to backtrack a second to mushrooms again. The time that I knew that it was going to be useful, the last time I got like seriously tripped was also, it was the worst trip I've ever had, but it was also the first time that I realized that they could be useful in a therapeutic sense, because I was hanging out one night with my buddy Bernie Clark. Bernie Clark was one of the producers of Naked City, which was a reading series, an open mic series here in Atlanta. It was very popular, like weird little underground series. He ran it with Gina Rakiki, who is amazing. Gina's, wonderful. Anyway, I'm with Bernie at his house one night, and he says, "Hey, I got these shrooms." And I was like, "All right, I'm in. Well, I've got nothing to do tomorrow. I have to make sure I let the dog out in a few hours, but like I got time." So we took these, and we took like a full dose.
How long ago was this?
This was,
like last week.
God, 5 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But I started tripping. I started going under. And at first it was, you get the body high, which is not always great. It's kind of, you feel a little strung out, but then when you're really going, you start getting the visuals and the audio hallucinations. And it was kind of great, though. Like, we're sitting in his living room and the walls are breathing, and he had this weird little cat that was just jumped up on my lap and just sat there and looked at me and purred. And it was weird, but it was really calming. But then we go outside to smoke cigarettes. It's midsummer. It's drizzling a little bit. It's dark out. He's got like candles and tiki torches lit. It's very dreamy and weird. And all of a sudden, the bottom drops out for me. Like all the way. And it starts because I realize that I'm tripping too hard to be coming down soon enough for the dog to get out before she pees in the kitchen, which is what she would do if she wasn't let out in time. And I feel guilty that I'm not going to be able to let the dog out, and she's going to pee in the kitchen, and I'm going to show up, and she's going to be ashamed, and I don't deserve to have a dog. I'm a bad person who doesn't deserve to have a dog, and oh my God, everything in my life is falling apart. And Jesus Christ, what does it even matter? Because we are just these animals that are just clusters of nerves and pain and sadness and suffering, like on the surface of this rock that's hurling through space. And like, we're in the only safe place in the fucking universe for humans to be. If you go 1 mile in any direction out from the earth, you die immediately. And at that point, I was like, I have to get away from here, and I have to walk into the forest, and I have to dig a hole, and I have to bury myself in it, and I have to wait until I'm dead, because that's the only answer here.
So how did you get a positive out of that?
Well, then it got worse, and it was just existential horror. And eventually, Bernie, in the meantime, while I'm going through this, Bernie has spent an hour telling me, without pausing, why Peter Jackson's King Kong is the greatest movie of all time. And I kept checking in with him.
That's total high talk.
I kept pulling myself out and going like, it's the drugs. And then Bernie's talking about King Kong, and I'm like, go back to the drugs. But eventually I come down, and we watch some anime for some reason. I'm not a fan. And then we watch like an episode of Doctor Who, which was nice. Mm-hmm. And then at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I realize that like I'm safe to go home. I'm done. It's gone. So I get in the car. I drive home. The dog's peed in the kitchen. She feels really bad. I feel terrible. I let her out. I clean the piss up, and I go lie down in bed. I feel like garbage. I'm the worst person in the world. I wake up 3 hours later, the sun's shining, and like the window is cracked open and there's a little breeze coming in. And I felt like all of this anxiety and all this anger and all this sadness that I'd been going through for the previous few months was like dealt with and filed away. And I got up and I picked up my computer and I went to a coffee shop and I wrote for like 8 hours.
Wow.
And that sort of sense of well-being and that sense of going like, I can move forward, I can keep working. It's not a nightmare. Yes, the universe is a cruel place.
It's like an anxiety exorcism.
It was. And it was, it was like my brain dealing with all of the demons at one time. And I knew that like, this doesn't solve all of my problems. At some point, shit's going to go tits up again and I'm going to feel terrible. But when it came down to it, this lasted for weeks. It wasn't like false sense of well-being. It was me being able to go out into the world and deal with problems that I'd had before. I couldn't make phone calls. Mm-hmm. Like if the phone was ringing, I couldn't answer it. I had to wait until I was ready to talk to people. I was having such severe anxiety that like if I had to make a doctor's appointment mm-hmm. because I had a tooth that was like rotting in my skull. I had to call a dentist and I hadn't been doing it for weeks because I was too anxious. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. And I didn't know but
if you take the first step, the horrifying second step is then a reality.
When it came down to it, it was just like, once I took that step, it was fine. And everything was fine. I dealt with like my tax problems. I was having money issues that I needed to deal. I dealt with all of these things. And like, mm-hmm. I was more functional because of this horrifying, the worst night of my life. And I can say that hands down. That was the worst night of my life. I couldn't even begin to tell you like how much existential dread was on my shoulders that night. I'm a writer. I don't have enough words for it, but it was at that point that I realized like, this is a useful tool. Mm-hmm. And I quit doing it for fun. Mm-hmm. And I started doing it. I started studying it and reading about it and then doing incredibly low dosages, a quarter, a tenth of what it would take to make you high. Mm-hmm. You don't even feel it. It's just it's a program running in the background.
Yeah.
But I found
switching up the way certain things are.
But I found that I'll do it for like a couple of weeks at a time where it's like every 3 days I'll wake up, I'll make sure to take a very small amount, and I'll go about my business. Mm-hmm. And I found that it just levels things a little bit. I don't want to go into the depths of hell again.
Yeah.
It was really shitty, and I can't imagine anybody purposefully jumping into that. I hear people talking about like trips on ayahuasca, which I would love to try, but I'm too afraid of diving that deep back into my psyche because everybody's got fucking shit going on in their brains, and I don't like my shit.
See, but that's why it's key to have a shaman who's a complete stranger.
That's true.
Someone who doesn't care that you're crying in the corner.
Yeah, better than a therapist.
Yes.
I probably need to do this. I've got a buddy he's had a long history with different drugs and never a drug addict, but mainly over the last decade, he's gotten really into mushrooms and was it salvia and things like that. And he's one of the friends that I have these conversations with about like deep existential things. And he'll stare at me and he's like, well, how do you know this? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think about it. But his mother passed away. And I was very close to her in high school and earlier years. I met him when I was 16 when I first moved to Georgia, and so I spent a lot of time, probably the first 4 or 5 years, I'm hanging out with him and being around his family often.
Yeah.
And she passed away she got leukemia and battled that for about 9 months, and the anniversary of her death is this spring. She died on Good Friday.
Wow.
And they were a pretty religious family, and he was, and I was for a long time. We met at church in the youth group that I went to when I first came here. And it was interesting that him and I have had a lot of conversations about this stuff, and he's used a lot of these different drugs over the years. And he was having a real rough time with his mother's death, obviously. I mean, who wouldn't? And he was very close with his mother. And they had their issues, but overall it was love and whatnot. But he called me about 9 months after she passed away, and he doesn't live here anymore. He lives a few states away. And he called me, and he was like, yeah, he had gone through a similar deal as you did. He said, yeah, I just took a bunch of mushrooms, but he did it on purpose. Yeah, he's like into the studying of this stuff too, and he was like, I'm at a point where I need to deal with this, and so he just got loaded up, and it rocked him. He told me it was like awful for like 12 hours. It was just horrible. But then he came out on the other end. But he was like talking about like laying on the floor, crying and gut wrenching pain and all this crazy shit. And he's like, yeah, man, I came out of it, and I definitely was. I think he realized that he needed to process outside of that, but then he got to a point where he's like, maybe I should address it this way. And I think that's the kind of the difference with me than with drugs is I like the idea of that, but I just don't know if I could ever actually do it. I don't know if I wanna. I don't want to go to those places. And so I process a lot internally, and I speak about a lot of things. I've dealt with a lot of problems in my life that I just kind of talked out or I just processed out, or, I would just be sitting there painting a picture and be thinking, and then all of a sudden have some major epiphany about something that happened to me 4 years earlier. And I was like, oh, that's why that happened that way. It was just interesting. And it sounds like a very similar process that probably takes me much, much longer to get to, years and years. But
I mean, I think any path you take to enlightenment is a worthwhile path.
Yes, it's a positive step.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying shrooms are definitely not for everybody. I mean, any kind of hallucinogen or any kind of like psychedelic or psychotropic drug is not for everybody.
Psychedelic, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they're absolutely not for everybody.
Well, it's like I've tried mushrooms because I've wanted that experience.
Right.
My body's just like, nope, this is not for you.
Nope, not for you.
You have been living off of hot sauce your entire life. Your stomach is dying.
It would be funny to see. Like, I would want somebody to record that, even if it was just like a small dose. Like, what do I do?
Here's the thing. I actually, one time when I was on, it wasn't shrooms, it was 2CB. It's another hallucinogen, which it's a lot more fun, but doesn't really help you in any kind of therapeutic way that I know of. I mean, it probably does, but it's fun. It's like more hallucinations, and like music sounds really cool, and like if you're in the right room, then textures move around, and it's just kind of like fun. But I decided that while my mind was open, I was going to record myself, like just sort of like free form. I mean, just like talking, just freestyle talking. And I started talking and like trailed off after 30 seconds and was like, I'm not that clever. Yeah. I'm just not that clever. Like I can't do this. This is way too overwhelming. I can't even look at my phone without my eyeballs like wanting to fall out. And I listened to the recordings later and like immediately erased them because they were humiliating. Yeah. I sounded like a just total fuckwit. Yeah. I mean, like, it was really bad.
I feel like seeing me sober, like a video of that, I've had similar feelings. I'm like, oh God, that guy. So yeah, you're probably right. I probably don't want to see anything.
No, you want to do this. You want to do this in a way like, it's like they talk about setting, and dosage. It's like the mindset you're in is important. The place where you're at, the setting is important, but like, and the dosage, the amount that you take is all really, really important. And like, setting is like massively important. You want to be somewhere that you feel comfortable. You want to be somewhere that you're not going to get interrupted. You want to be somewhere that you're not going to have to perform as a human being, because I will tell you from experience, like trying to act like a human being is like trying to learn how to work a marionette puppet like on the fly. It's just really weird, and you're like, they know. But anyway, I do want to make clear while we're sitting here, I don't actually do this often. Like I'm not like a very regular drug user. Yeah. I like a
but
pot
it has its
occasionally
amazing
to sleep.
Benefits.
Absolutely, and I drink, and like I used to smoke, but like. And then like a few times in college, Molly, but like that was, it's not like a daily thing.
Drinking is my antidote.
I've never really understood Molly. I bet I mean, coming from a religious background, I always avoided drugs. And then...
You can grab me another one.
Yeah,
and then I started to, like, you know, be around people who did drugs. And I would kind of judge, like, do I want to try that? And by how people were on the drugs. In Molly, it's like, oh, you're really happy. And then I would talk to them the next day on the come down.
Right.
And it's just like, oh, so you basically want to kill yourself right now. I'm too old for that. That sounds ridiculous.
Oh, God, no, the hangovers from that. It's absolutely not worth it. I mean, like, it's really absolutely not worth it. And honestly, I would say, besides like, the shrooms, I've not found, like maybe pot, I've not found a drug that, like, actually has positive benefits in the long run. Mm-hmm. Like, alcohol allows me to get a little looser and a little chattier, but I also tend to overindulge.
Yeah,
and
it's a tightrope.
It's a tightrope, and like, I mean, alcoholism runs in my family, and I have chosen a life path and a career path that just like begs for you to drink. Yeah, and it's absolutely not healthy at all. But anyway, I do not advocate drug use for anybody under a certain age, but for everybody over a certain age, there are certain drugs for you out there that are probably good for you.
Our brains are just chemicals. We're playing around with them. You do the same thing when you're getting anxiety meds. You're trying to figure out what works for you, what doesn't.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's got a use, and you're hoping it will be a good use for you, and it might be wrong, and then you talk to your doctor and you figure it out.
Yeah.
Just with mushrooms and other psychedelics, it's a little different. It's more about you figure it out on your own.
Or you just like it. For me, it was very important. Bernie, and surely he won't get too pissed at me for outing him here. Bernie was kind of our resident shaman for a long time. If you were going to try psychedelics for the first time, you send somebody to Bernie because he is knowledgeable about it. He's also like knows how to deal with people who are just open it, man. Just open it. It's cool.
I didn't want to interrupt.
So no. Anyway, you need somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And you can't just jump in. It's foolish and careless and probably a little bit dangerous to just jump into these things without somebody kind of helping guide you, somebody knowledgeable who you trust. That's absolutely key. Never with anybody you don't trust. Because even with people you trust, you could have the worst fucking night of your life. And that's just,
You need to have somebody that can talk to you and console you and whatnot. It's funny. I was just sitting there thinking about like the generational, maybe the vices that you might inherit, so to speak, or maybe just the things that you're into. But I've talked to both my parents about drugs and, mainly like pot and things like that. And neither of my parents ever really used drugs, but they both drank.
Yeah.
And they both still drink. I think my dad probably was a little bit of a heavy drinker when, he was 20s.
Right.
But I mean, when he was mid-30s, I mean, he had me, like, this is creepy. The age I am now is the age that my father was when I was born. And I was the baby.
Oh, I'm 10 years older than my father was when I was born.
Yeah.
And I'm like so far beyond, but yeah.
When my father was my age, he had 3 children. And that just weirds me out. And my mom, I bypassed her. She was 27. So I was like, that's weird. But this is the thing about like the responsibilities and the things that my father, my dad was 40, he like owned his own company. It was like the largest architectural firm in South Florida and had 2 houses. And I just look at that and I'm like, got a 1-bedroom on Ponce, got a puppy dog, and a weird podcast. All right,
Well, when my father was, around the time I was born, my dad was a traveling salesman. He was in the apparel industry. He was in the fashion industry. He sold like women's fashion. And he was a rep for a few fashion lines. But he was also a musician and a total hippie. And, like, he told stories about, like, and he would kill me for saying this, so I love you, Dad, if you're listening. But he would, like, tell stories about, like, how, like, he would, like, get stoned driving down the highway and he'd, like, have some seeds from his pot, and he'd like remember the mile marker and throw the seeds out the window.
Wow.
And like, I just like, he knew nothing was going to grow, but like he would check when he drove back by. He'd like, you know, kind of like look out the window, see if there was
trying
anything.
to be,
you know, maybe
Johnny
pull over,
Applepot.
Maybe like,
Johnny Pot Seed. That's really good. I like that, man.
like maybe he'd like pull over and like change his tire at that particular point, or like maybe that's where he has to go pee.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys find that you are more like your parents than you'd like to admit at this age?
Oh, hell yes, and it terrifies me.
I do the same thing. I did it. I've kind of realized that my parents met doing theater, and it's kind of like they raised us in this typical suburban, you know, suburb of Cincinnati, and lived in you lived in the suburbs and lived in neighborhoods with cul-de-sacs and crap like that. And I always felt like, as I was, you know, in my late teens, early 20s, that I was so different from my parents. Oh, I just had it, you know, like anybody who's 21, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then I got older, and I was like, man, I really love antiques. And my parents,
Antiques are cool. They're old.
They're amazing.
Neat.
And it's just like, the older I get, the more I'm just like, oh my God, I am my fucking parents. But then I started realizing, though, and not to be like, oh, I'm cool, but I started realizing how cool they actually were, because I started looking at my childhood from a different lens. Mm-hmm. And I realized that though my parents looked like just the cookie cutter couple, they met doing community theater, and they actually ran all the drama stuff and the theater stuff at the church. My mom was always, you know, she was an Aquarius, and she could never figure out what she wanted to do, because she really just ultimately wanted to go back to school and get a master's degree in theater, which she did. Nice. And my dad's an architect. He's a fucking artist. He draws really cool, buildings, and he was a woodworker, and he was into martial arts, and he was super into Bob Dylan, and mom was into the Beatles. And I got older, and I was like, oh my God, my parents were like amazing. And I didn't realize it, but I had this epiphany about a year and a half ago. We were doing volume, maybe it's 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago. Volume 4 of Transgression. And I was sitting there, and
Which one was Volume 4?
Oh, yeah. Volume 4 was the dating game at Dad's Garage.
Yeah.
Which
It was a good show.
Yeah.
It was probably the most ridiculous one that I felt like I had no control over. It
was absurd, but it was fun. It was really entertaining.
It was everybody on that stage was amazing, and they, you know, Transgression, that wasn't theater back then. That was just a reading series, and that was just improv on stage. And we did a couple run-throughs the day before and the day of, and off to the races. Y'all have fun out there. But when we were starting it up, I had to block the whole thing. That was the main thing that we did, is we kind of gave them like, hey, this is the direction you need to go, right? XYZ, and here's the blocking. And so I had to sit on YouTube. I had to look on YouTube and find old dating game videos. Yeah. So I did a couple things. I looked at the lighting. I had to block it, do all this stuff. But then I realized, I was like, oh shit, we need an announcer for the opening of the show, because he says from Los Angeles, California, it's the dating game, you know, this thing. And I sat there and I was like, I need to get somebody to do that. Who's going to do it for me? And I sat there and I thought, oh, John, you have a radio voice. Just do it yourself. So I got a microphone out and put on some headphones, and I just sat there and listened to it. And then I recorded myself doing it like 30 times. And I finally found a take that I was like, nah, this is decent. This will work for it. Right. And so when you at the show, that's how it started off, was my voice, which was creepy to hear it booming through Dad's garage. But this is what was weird, is I got done recording that thing, and then all of a sudden I had this flashback to being 10 years old and coming down to church, coming down to the kitchen to go to church one Sunday morning when my parents were doing the drama ministry at the church. And my parents were pretty cool, because they were taking it and they were taking these like Christian messages and theming it to pop culture, right, to make it more interesting. Yeah. And they did a Twilight Zone episode. Huh. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? I come downstairs and my dad is sitting in the kitchen with a tape recorder in front of him with a script, and he's reading, like he had rewritten like a monologue intro that Twilight Zone always starts out with. Right. And he sat there and he recorded himself for like, it was up early. He recorded himself for like an hour trying to get it just right. And I was like, oh my God. That's cool. I just did that to the dating game, and there's this flashback to 20 plus years ago of my father doing the same exact thing for Twilight Zone, which is also weird.
I swear, we all slowly turn into our parents over time.
How are you guys like your parents?
Well, my father got his theater degree from the University of Miami, and like my father was theater goes way up the line in my family. I mean, my father, his stage name was Ricky DaCosta.
Wow.
Which is a family stage name. My grandfather was Mel DaCosta for his brief little stint, and my grandfather's cousin, so I guess that would be my second cousin or third cousin. I think. I don't know. But he was, or my first cousin twice removed. I don't know. He was a guy named Morton DaCosta, born Morton Tecosky, but he was famous for directing The Music Man, the film.
Oh, wow.
As he directed it on Broadway, and then he ended up directing the film. He also did Auntie Mame, and a number of things on Broadway. He was a very prolific director, and just made like 3 movies. One was like The Music Man, which was transcendent and famous, and then Auntie Mame with Rosalind Russell, which is a fun movie, and like I love it, but it's not as great as like Music Man. And then he made like one garbage movie that like was totally panned by critics, and he just threw up his hands and went back to Broadway for the rest of his life.
Not a bad retirement plan.
No, absolutely. It was like, fuck this. Movies are stupid. I don't like working with Hollywood. I'm just going to go back to Broadway where I belong. But I mean, like in that way, we're like the Tecosky family are all a bunch of melodramatic assholes who, I mean, many of whom have been in theater. I mean, like a lot of my aunts and uncles have like they sing and they play music, and like my father is still a musician.
It's a big old art clan.
He quit theater years and years ago, but he still loves playing, and he's a very talented actor. I've seen him work before.
Have you ever taken on the stage name?
No, I haven't. Although I thought about it a lot because, but the thing is, the stage name DaCosta back when like Morton Tecosky took on DaCosta, it was because like Tecosky was like the wrong kind of ethnic at that time period during those years. I mean, it was like, you sounded Jewish. And my family is like, that side of the family is Jewish. But it wasn't like cool to be Jewish unless you were like a Borscht Belt comedian or something like that. But like for a director, I mean, like if you wanted a certain type of career, then you would totally like let your Star of David fly. But like if you wanted like, if you wanted to be accepted by like middle America, if you wanted to be accepted to direct Music Man, like DaCosta it sounds like it's probably Spanish or Portuguese, and like that's totally cool. And I don't know, I think that like I kind of, for me, though I thought that I love the family stage name, I think it's fantastic. I kind of wanted to make my way with like my birth name and like, put a fucking flag down and go like, no, we're Tecoskys. This is who we are. And
it just sounds great. I remember the first time I saw like on a Right Club thing, just like Nick Tecosky before I knew you. And it was just like, damn, that's a good name.
I love the name. My orthodontist, Dr. Schaup, in 3rd grade. And I can still, the best impression I do of anyone to this day is Dr. Schaup. And nobody fucking knows who Dr. Schaup is.
Can we
but you
hear
have
it?
to trust me on this. Like, Nicholas Tecosky. That's a movie star's name. I love that name. You've got to, you Nicholas Tecosky, be a movie star.
I feel like that's like Jerry Seinfeld's
It was a little bit
uncle or something.
It was, it's a little bit like, I mean, he was a little smarmy. He was a nice guy. He wasn't a very good orthodontist, as evidenced by my teeth. But he was a very like nice guy, and honestly, like that one weird thing really stuck with me. It didn't make me want to be an actor, but it was like, well, Nicholas Tecosky is a movie star's name.
It's weird the way you can kind of like almost be kind of tricked into falling in love with your name.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to always hate my name, De Benedictus, because I'd have to spell it out for everyone.
It's the coolest name, though, De Benedictus.
Well, here's where it comes from.
You sound like a monk or an assassin.
Or you sound like a lyric in a Busta Rhymes song.
That's true.
It's so fast. You're like, what the hell did you just say?
Did he say De Benedictus?
Well, here's the thing. My grandfather came over into, and this kind of fits in what you were saying about, due to the parlance of the times. He came over he came into Boston in like early 1900s, and the Italians had taken over the ghettos, and they were like, we don't want Italians anymore. So he was from southern Italy, and the family name is Benedetto. That's Italian as fuck.
Yeah. Wait, De Benedictus.
The DE at the beginning and the IS at the end, those are both Greek.
Yeah.
He went down and he jumped on a Greek boat, and when he showed up in Boston and they asked him his name, he said De Benedictus, because he was afraid they would basically kick him out if he said Benedetto.
Damn. Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, there's like a couple pages in the Boston.
Sucks to be an immigrant in America.
Hey, I can actually speak to this because my family's Irish. And when they got off the boat, they dropped the O because it's I'm from the clan of O'Carroll. There's actually a magnet on my refrigerator there, right above the crevice going up right by the freezer, and it is the crest, the O'Carroll crest. And I forget about it from time to time because I mean I'm like 6th or 7th generations. I mean, obviously I never dealt with it, but yeah, my dad's got a lot of O'Carroll stuff at his house, and it's weird to think. I hated my name though. I always hated my name growing up because you get the Christmas Carol, and then John was just kind of a boring name with that 10 other kids in my class had, and then my dad told me about what our name means, and our name means. In one translation, it means slaughter. Right. And another one, it basically means like badass motherfucker. And there's actually, I was listening to a podcast.
Both sound like great wrestling names.
Oh, yeah. There was Johnny Slaughter. You know?
Yeah. Johnny Slaughter.
There was a podcast that I listened to called Lore, which is pretty
I've heard it
these days.
Yeah.
I think there's a TV show on Amazon. I got into it probably about 1.5 years ago, and I've listened to it. I need to actually revisit it. There's probably a ton of new episodes I haven't checked out.
Yeah, they keep downloading onto my phone, and I keep like just forgetting to listen to them.
It's such a great episode.
I listen to the Gravy podcast. Like that is, I don't know why. That's like the one that I will, if a new episode comes out, I'm going to listen to the Gravy podcast. I don't know why. That's like the one that I will never miss.
It's funny how that works. I've been so busy lately. I'm behind on a lot of the podcasts, but randomly about 6 months ago, I was washing my dishes, listening to the podcast, and he starts going in, talking about this castle in Ireland, and he starts going in, and all of a sudden, he's talking about the O'Carrolls, and he's talking about the guy where my name came from and what it meant and what this guy was, and he was a badass warrior that basically the King of England, or the King of Ireland, or the ruler of Ireland, had been kidnapped by British soldiers. And this guy and a bunch of dudes went over there and got him back and kicked a lot of ass. And he was the main guy. And then the King of Ireland gave him the name of Carol, which meant slaughter or great warrior, badass motherfucker. And my dad told me that when I was in high school. And I was like...
It's very Shakespearean.
Yeah, I was like, Carol's a pretty cool name. I think I'm all right with it, you know? So, Nick, what do you have going on in the future? I mean, you got Right Club rocking and rolling again. Do you have any other...
Yeah, Right Club's going. We're trying to we're trying to kind of get the podcast back together because we did the Right Club Atlanta podcast for a long time, and we kind of stepped away from it because Mike and I are both just like busy as hell at that time. I mean, like we're not constantly busy as hell. Yeah. Mike is. I have large amounts of time to myself. No, I am trying to sell a couple of scripts right now. There was one that was written a couple of years ago that has just been like floating around in the ether. We got investors for it, and then they went away, and it went in a turn. It's like a very typical like movie story about like you almost have this like life-changing money and check, and like everything's going to be different and everything's going to be wonderful, and then like you get a phone call and they're like, oh yeah, the investor pulled out. And like nobody gets money and nothing gets made, and then like you're back to square one. But I've got another script that was actually based on a short story that Mike Johns wrote, my co-producer in Right Club. If we haven't said that yet,
I think people here know who Mike is for the most part.
If you're listening to this and you're probably like you probably know Mike.
If you've made it this far,
Mike Johns is like Atlanta's worst kept secret. Like Mike Johns is awesome and everybody should know him.
Yeah, we definitely he was on
Season
1 of Lit and Bruised, and
that's right.
That was a great episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wrote a short story, a weird little horror story. It was about 10 pages long, and for years after I read it, I was like, Mike, I want you to let me adapt this, and he was totally fine with doing it. We just didn't have the time to put it together, and so. Last spring, when I got off of this other project, I finally decided, like, I've been wanting to write this for years. I'm going to jump into this. So it's a horror film, horror script based on a short story that Mike wrote, and it's two guys in the woods, and it's weird and it's fun, and I'm trying to get it made right now, and I'm trying to get it made more through independent channels because every time I've worked with Hollywood, I don't know how movies get made. I'll be honest with you. It's called Double Odd, and I'm not going to tell you any more about it beyond that because it's like until we actually sell it,
break ground.
Yeah, but once we do, I'll tell you all about it. And beyond that, I'm just just writing other stuff and running Write Club and narrating audiobooks, mostly erotica, in the quiet moments. I spend those down in the smut mines, actually putting food on the table and keeping a roof over my head.
Smut mines feed a lot of people.
Yeah, you load 16 cums, and what do you get?
It's interesting what pays the bills, though.
Oh God, yeah.
It's bizarre. I think about that all the time. Where since more or less since I was 18, every job that I've had has strongly relied on the internet, and I'm like, what would I be doing for a living if the internet didn't exist?
I feel like a solar flare hit the earth and everything went out.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's the end of my life.
I mean, I can't farm. Like, am I just going to be like, am I going to be like telling tales a la like Homer just around a fire? It's like,
I think about that often. I'm like, maybe I should learn a trade or something like that, because most of my job is based off more or less about, I'm a project manager, but I'm a marketing consultant.
Right.
But most of my job is like social media contracts and marketing emails. I create, write, and send marketing emails. That's the majority of what I do with my days. And I'm like, the internet wasn't there.
When we go back to the Bronze Age, you might have to like reconfigure your reality a little bit.
I'll just go into like the flyer industry.
Yeah.
I'll just be making
get into
posters.
printmaking.
Yeah.
Well, I think about like in my spare time, when I have time, the thing I do to relax, and like almost the only thing that fully relaxes me and like lets me get in the zone, is I cook. Like at home, I cook, and I cook most of the meals in our house. Amy is very decent at it too. She just enjoys me doing it because she doesn't like it as much as I do. But in a pinch, like I worked in restaurants when I was younger, but I was mostly a server. I briefly worked in a couple of kitchens when I was in high school, college, but I didn't really take to it then. It was only in my late 20s and into my 30s that I really got into it. But I think that like if I had my druthers, if I was going to like reset everything and start a new life, I would probably just cook. I enjoy doing it. But then again, I used to love writing more than anything in the world, and then I started doing it as a profession, and now it's torturous. So like I can also imagine like going into the kitchen and going like, God damn it.
In an alternate reality or a parallel universe, there's a Nick Tecosky who is a great culinary gem who loves writing at night when he gets home from closing the restaurant.
And he dreams about like a life where he can like just sit down and write during the day. And he's like, God, wouldn't it be great just to like
write
work with my mind, and like it'd be great to write a screenplay. I bet I could get a movie made.
You guys need to connect. You guys need to talk.
I really want to. I want to. Like, I think we'd cancel each other out.
You would just like you would implode.
Just turn into like a really neurotic jellyfish.
Well, in 5-10 years, if I see a write-up in Creative Loafing about Nick Tecosky's newest restaurant, I'll be like, hey, I heard it. You heard it here first on Lit and Bruised.
My Uncle Mark actually owned a diner in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, called T's Corner Cafe. T for Tecosky, obviously. Yeah. But he and my aunt ran it together, and he was the cook. And he was like, it was a diner. I mean, like, it was like, you know, like cool, like spoon, breakfast foods, like a little, and he almost worked himself to death. Like, he really did. People loved the place. He had regulars. They were, I mean, like, they loved that place like it was their own home. But eventually he just had to, he had to sell it because my aunt was like, this will kill you. Yeah. And I need you alive because I love you and you are my person. So let's get rid of this thing. Yeah. So I sometimes wonder, because I think that it's a habit on my father's side of the family to, and maybe it was Bukowski that said this, to find the thing that we love and let it kill us.
Yeah, it was either Bukowski or it's been attributed to him before. I know the quote though. And
I know the thing. It can't be Bukowski. I'm not smart enough to remember.
He's definitely been attributed to it, but I don't know if that's correct. There's like gazillion memes. On Instagram. And
maybe it was Abraham Lincoln or
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ probably said it.
I'm pretty sure that
John
was a
Locke
beatitude
or something.
Jesus loved humanity so much that he let it kill him.
That is solid.
Yeah. Oh God, and scene.
And on that note, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Thanks, guys. This was fun. And you can always come over to my place. I got a little plastic baggie with mind-altering solutions.
Hey. Do a little microdose. Maybe you cook up some pasta for us.
It sounds great. And I can read you some of my screenplays.
That sounds like
You can come over and yell at my cat.
This sounds like a weekend.
It sounds like a weekend.
I love it.
It does sound good.
I'm in.
Weekend at Nicky's.
I'm all in.
Well, we just want to thank everyone for listening, and Nick's going to go and sign the yellow couch now.
I'm going to be the first person to sign the yellow couch, you suckers.
Yeah, we've got a new tradition that Tecosky brought with him. He said, "Hey, I want to sign this thing." And so if you're listening, if you've made it this far and you are a past guest on Lit and Bruised, give me a call, shoot me a text, come on over, sign the couch. Have a beer or two.
So, yeah, and as always, don't die dumb.
Don't do it.